Good morning, everybody. Welcome. It's good to see most of you. I'll invite you, if you're comfortable, to put your screen on so we can see one another. This morning, we will be talking about living in joy and calm in the midst of uncertainty and chaos. So I don't know what your lives have been like, and I wouldn't assume or presume. I'm sure we've all had similar yet different experiences. And this morning I wanted to look at some of the teachings from the Chassidic masters to see how they might help us today in our current state. So before we begin, I'd like to invite you just to get comfortable in your seat, and we're going to take a few deep breaths and ground and center ourselves so that we can be present for our learning today. If you're comfortable, you can lower your gaze or close your eyes and plant your feet firmly on the floor, your palms resting in your lap, and just take a couple deep breaths in, inhaling deeply through your nose and exhaling completely through your mouth. And if you're comfortable, you can even let out a sigh. It might sound like this. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 yai dai dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 yai dai dai dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Ivdu et Hashem besimcha, ivdu et Hashem besimcha, bo lefanav birnana, lefanav birnana. Ivdu et Hashem besimcha, ivdu et Hashem besimcha, bo lefanav birnana, lefanav birnana. Yada da yada da yada da 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 yada da 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 yada da 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 yada da 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 da. Worship God in happiness and show up in joy. These are the words and the essence of what many Chassidic masters would teach. So this morning, I wanted to start with that little tune, getting us in the mood for the sense of how is it that we can be in joy when there is so much going on around us that is not joyful, that is tragic and sad. So I wanted to start our official session by just doing a brief check-in with everybody. If you could say maybe 2, 3, 5 words about how you're doing. So I'm going to give everybody 30 seconds of think time to come up with your adjectives. And if you would like to share, you're invited to do so. And if you don't want to share, as always, you are allowed to just say pass. I'm going to call on you according to my screen. So I see Jan and Alan Lev. If you can share with us a few adjectives of how you are doing. I think you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I have to unmute myself. Oh, yesterday, I'm sorry, I had problems with my computer.
Oh, wait, hang on. I'm calling on Jan and Alan Lev right now. We'll get to you in a second, Janice.
I call this accommodation time. That's it. Accommodation. We're
Accommodation.
to the situation.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Jan, anything to add?
I'm using this time to heal.
Beautiful.
E.
Thank you. Next, I see Susan.
Oh, me?
Yes.
I made a little bubble and I'm afraid to leave it.
That's where you are right now. Yes, I understand. Let's have Norton.
Existing and tolerating.
Existing and tolerant. Yes. Shamati, I hear that. Sheila. You have to unmute yourself.
Okay. I consider myself a strong person, but right now I'm feeling out of control and I need somebody just to say it's going to be okay.
All right. Shamati. Evelyn. You have to unmute yourself, please.
Hi, well, I'm still working full-time. I had a few jobs. I'm down to 2, but that's still keeping me pretty busy. And I'm in medical, so I see an awful lot of things. So these little things keep me a little more grounded to reality instead of, sadness and the stuff. But I love watching, but I'm at work.
All right. Glad you're here. Thank you. Mike.
Okay. I'm working. I'm on the phone next to me, but I've been working, and today I'm celebrating my son's 30th birthday.
Yom Holadet Sameach. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Fran.
Just like you taught last night, take that negative and flip it to a positive. I'm working on that.
Yes. We all are, I imagine, or most of us are.
I think so.
Thank you. Carol.
I feel like I'm in transition because things are changing now from staying home and trying to figure out where we're safe to go out. So it's a period of transition.
Yep. Yes. Thank you. And Joe?
Yes, it's Diane. I'm sorry.
Hi, Diane.
One of these days I'll learn how to change this. We basically have fallen into a very kind of pleasant routine during the day. We do a lot of exercise. We've started swimming, taking out food from restaurants. But other than that, we are basically homebound, reading, playing bridge online, and listening to you. And somehow or other, the day passes.
Yes. All right. Thank you. And Janice.
I have to unmute. Oh, okay. I would say the spirit is learning. Learning about myself, learning how to define my communication with my partner, and so that it is even more godly and spiritual, and learning how to be aware of my thoughts that make me sad and my thoughts that make me happy, and how to juggle them so that it comes out the more happy ones.
Yes. All right. Hopefully we'll be able to share some thoughts today that will facilitate that. Thank you. The way I'm going to run the class is I'm going to be asking questions and you're welcome to answer them. You'll have to unmute yourself to do that. Or if you feel more comfortable, you can raise your hand, but I think we're a small enough group that if you have something to say, you can jump in. So I guess I want to just start off by asking, do you think it's possible to find joy and calm in the midst of uncertainty and chaos? Is it a possibility? Like what's the starting point?
the starting point. Focus on something that's going to be positive results.
So you would say, yes, it is positive. Maybe we could just do
Absolutely.
a show of hands. So by a show of hands, how many of you think it is possible to find joy and chaos in the midst of uncertainty? Sorry, joy and calm in the midst of uncertainty and chaos. All right, well, I guess that's why you're all here, right? So that's good. I'm glad that we are all sort of starting from the same place, right? There is a belief that we can find the joy and the calm. I think one of the things that I've learned over the years that has been helpful, incredibly helpful for me, is this notion of the dialectic. And what do I mean by that? Judaism is really good at holding paradoxical beliefs, systems, both to be true at the same time. Right, so we can start off with this notion of God. God is immanent, very close, and God is transcendent. And they're not mutually exclusive. They can both be true at the same time. And I offer that for our teaching this morning. Yes, there can be uncertainty and chaos on the one hand, and there can be joy and calm on the other hand, and they don't negate one another. They are able to exist side by side simultaneously. Now, for most of us in our Western educated mindset, we live in a very binary world, right? It's black or white. It's good or bad. It's up or down. And one of the teachings for me that is so crucial is this notion of holding two paradoxical truths simultaneously. And that's where we're going to go this morning. So I want to acknowledge that there is uncertainty and there is chaos and there is panic and fear and anxiety and depression and all of these emotions, feelings, realities on the one hand. And at the same time, we can still work and find a place of joy and calm and beauty and gratitude. I really wanted to set the stage and so it doesn't appear as if I am living with my head in the sand, which I've been known to do, or I am showing up like Pollyanna, like everything's going to be okay, everything's going to be great. So I hope that it will be. I believe ultimately things will shift and fall and be recreated. I believe in hope and optimism and the resilience of the human spirit. And I just want to acknowledge that there's a lot out there that could pull us in a direction that might not be helpful. And this morning, I want to focus more on the joy and the calm. I'm going to start off by giving a brief biography of the Ba'al Shem Tov. So the Ba'al Shem Tov, Israel ben Eliezer, lived in the Ukraine from 1698 when he was born until 1760 when he died. The name, the Ba'al Shem Tov, means master of the good name. He's also known, his nickname was the Besht, and that is an acronym taking the first letters of his name. So sometimes you might hear him referred to as the Ba'al Shem Tov, sometimes you might hear him referred to as the Besht. And he really revolutionized Jewish thought. So at this time in 17th century European Jewish history, there had been lots of pogroms. There was an incredible rift between the learned Jews and the unlearned Jews. Some of you may be familiar with this period in history. There was a group called the Mitnagdim, who were the ones that were more educated and learned and Talmud scholars, and they really butt heads with the Chassidim. The Chassidim and Chassidut were much more about the simple person. Some of you might have heard the story of the little boy who plays the flute during services, and there's some people that are berating him, and the rabbi says, no, that's all he can play. He's expressing his passion for God. Similar story of a young child who only knows the Aleph Bet and can't really say the prayers. And there are people who were making fun of him and hushing him and telling him to be quiet in the services. And the rabbi says, no, it's okay. God can arrange the letters. right? So there's this sense of, in the Chassidic world, that it was really for the general population, the average person who wasn't so educated, who didn't really know the Torah and the Talmud and all of the laws. And this is the world that the Ba'al Shem Tov inhabited and lived in. He was eventually got married, had a daughter. He was orphaned at a very young age, sort of taking a step backwards, and he was adopted by his community. He lived in the village of Tjost. He also loved to go in the woods, and that really brought him great joy. He was, you know, we think about it, I don't know, when I was growing up, I was allowed out of the house without a cell phone because they didn't exist. I'm sure the same for many of you. And there was just a wandering, right? Like, be home for dinner. And so that was what he did, you know, he just went out in the fields and in the forest. And he was at some point, this is, you know, history and legend sort of meld into each other. He was inducted to what was called a secret fellowship, the hidden tzaddikim, the hidden righteous people. So he was, you know, in this sort of secret fellowship, and he didn't really reveal his identity until much later in his life. There are stories, and again, I can't attest to the validity, but the Ba'al Shem Tov, it was taught that he was visited by Elijah the prophet. And he had another teacher, right, that was sort of showing up at various points in his life. And I like to use the language of downloading, since it is a more common understood term. It was almost as if these prophets from the other side would visit the Ba'al Shem Tov and almost give him a download, right? Like a spiritual download of, this is what it's going to take to be a leader at this time in history. And while he was a teacher, this Ba'al Shem Tov, he also became a writer of amulets, and he was a medicine man. He was a healer, and he really worked and lived among the people, the average person. It wasn't until he became 36 that he began preaching openly. He began to preach openly. So remember, he's a teacher. He sort of is part of this secret fellowship, but he doesn't reveal his true knowledge base until he's 36 years old, which I also found interesting, right? For those of you that know gematria, that know Jewish numerology, 18 is chai, or life, and right, 18 times 2 is 36. So it felt to me like a coming out on his 36th birthday, that he didn't have to stay silent about his knowledge or the secret fellowship that he was a part of. He lived basically about 60 years, which was a long time for those days. And there have been many tales about him, his supernatural ability. There are tales about him being able to time travel, which is always very interesting. It's called kvitzat haderech, which means you're sort of, you could be in one place in the morning and one place in the evening, and they could be 500 miles apart. And we know that there weren't airplanes back then. So these are the kind of stories that were told about him. He really was the founder of the Chassidic movement and has a lot of lore and legend attached to him. So if you're ready to dive in, I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to look at some actual texts that come from the Ba'al Shem Tov. Can you all see the screen? A thumbs up or a wave? Yes. What I'd like to do is go through each of these texts and try to answer the questions, which means that that's your invitation to jump in and answer the questions. So the first text is study with energy and great joy that will reduce disturbing thoughts. Very short text, study with energy and great joy that will reduce disturbing thoughts. So what do you think the Ba'al Shem Tov was referring to? And how might this apply to our lives today?
Whatever you do,
Go ahead.
Whatever you're doing now, even.
Yes,
You
so
can
this
do
morning,
joy.
study with great joy.
I'm trying to put together a Zoom birthday party, and it's a first, and I'm like really crazy thinking how to do it and get it done for the people that are going to attend. It's totally challenged for me, and I'm trying to make it a positive enjoyment for future reference.
Yeah, so even when we have challenging educational opportunities ahead of us, are we able to approach them with energy and great joy so that it reduces the inner chatter of, I can't believe I have to do this. Why did I volunteer? What was I thinking? What's wrong with me? I should have had one of my grandkids do this. I want to pull my hair, whatever it is. Right?
I didn't get this.
Was I just in your mind for a minute, Fran?
Thank you.
If we can sort of shift that attention and show up with more zeal and more excitement and more energy and enjoy, it will reduce disturbing thoughts. So how might that apply to our lives today and our circumstances today? We just heard one example. Any other thoughts about how this can apply to our lives today?
Well, when you realize that you're about to do or entertain a task, that you do it, that you might as well try to get the positive out of it, whether it's cleaning your house or if you had to go to the store. I mean, there's certain things, and it's just how you approach it, that the job has to be done. To go in and just dread it and say, oh, I can't believe I got to keep doing this, rather than looking at it and say, oh, I'm so thankful that I'm able to do this, that I can move my arms or my legs, and just look for the positive in it. And I always just say it doesn't cost any more to think positive about a situation than negative.
Amen. That's true, right? So whatever it is that we are facing in our challenges, this study, right? So we're really broadening what he was referring to. I believe he was really referring to at the time when you're studying Torah, right? When you're studying Talmud, when you're studying Kabbalah, the mystical text, whatever it is that you're studying, show up with energy, excitement, and great joy. So we want to apply that to today, and we might have to expand the notion of study, although I want to thank each of you for showing up energetically and hopefully enjoy this morning, right? But to also, in the back of your mind, just have a note to self, right? So how are you experiencing this class differently if you are showing up energetically and with joy? Does somehow the information that we hear or that we learn get translated in a different way if we are approaching it from a place of energy and great joy? My sense as an educator and as a lifelong student is the answer is yes, it's true. When we show up and we're excited about information, then we have a greater likelihood of retaining it. I remember being a senior in undergrad and having to fulfill a science requirement of geology. And I thought it was going to be the best class ever. And I thought it was going to be about like learning the power of crystals. That was my thought. I was completely wrong. It was about tectonic plates and volcanoes. And I did not bring great joy nor great energy to that class. And it didn't go well, right? And then I have other classes that I've attended over the years with zeal and passion and joy. And those are the classes that I remember the most and are the most integrated into who I am. So if we can take that principle and apply it to the rest of our life, when we go to the grocery store, how are we showing up? When we are sitting at home and we are twiddling our thumbs or trying to figure out what the next activity is, or having to do laundry or make dinner or figure out whatever it is that's on your list to do today, are we able to show up with energy and joy so that any disturbing thoughts that we have can be reduced? Any other thoughts?
I think if I've noticed if my body, if I change my posture because it's associated with my mind and I sit really straight up, that will induce a feeling of excitement and energy. And if I smile, or if I sort of as if I was performing, and I really get a real joy from that. So if I do that same kind of posture when I'm cooking or when I'm listening now to you, I just became aware of it. So thank you for the gift.
Thank you for sharing that. So that's a little tip. You can sit up straight, right? That changes the physical structure of our bodies. So we're going to try a little experiment. I want everybody to slouch over, right? So just like, you know, sort of slouch over. Notice how you feel. And now I want you to sit up straight. Sit up totally straight. Can you feel the difference in your body of the activation of the from here to here, right? And now we're going to do another exercise. This was a great learning. A friend had a birthday party with I think it was something like laughter yoga, it's called. And she was teaching that you can't be angry or sad when you're smiling. So she suggested what she calls smile push-ups. And you literally put your fingers by your mouth and you just smile. So a little tip, right? If you're sitting in your house and you're feeling a little bit dejected or unsure, just think of smile push-ups, right? So smiling enables us to be more in a place of happiness and joy. So we have two actual movements that can also help to energize us and bring us closer to a state of happiness. So sitting up straight and doing our smile push-ups. We're going to move on to the next text. The Ba'al Shem Tov, the founder of the Chassidic movement, was once asked, why is it that Chassidim, meaning the students of the Rebbe, so there's a Rebbe, a rabbi called a Rebbe, and then the Rebbe has students, which are called a Chassid is one, and Chassidim are many. So why is it that the Chassidim, that the students of the rabbis, burst into song and dance at the slightest provocation? Is this the behavior of a healthy, sane individual? All right, we can imagine what the scene must look like, okay? The Ba'al Shem Tov responds with a story. Once a musician came to town, a musician of great but unknown talent. He stood on a street corner and began to play. Those who stopped to listen could not tear themselves away, and soon a large crowd stood, enthralled by the glorious music whose equal they had never heard before. Before long, they were moving to its rhythm, and the entire street was transformed into a dancing mass of humanity. We might call that today, what are they called? Like flash mobs, right? Yeah. I think that's sort of the modern day version of what's going on here. A deaf man walked by and wondered, has the world gone mad? Why are the townspeople jumping up and down, waving their arms and turning in circles and dancing in the middle of the street? Chassidim, these students, concluded the Ba'al Shem Tov, are moved by the melody that issues forth from every creature in God's creation. If this makes them appear mad to those with less sensitive ears, should they therefore cease to dance?
Never.
Somebody said never. All right. So what is this, the meaning and the message of this story? What do you think he was trying to share with this tale?
A freedom.
A freedom? Yep. Can you say more?
Freedom to be spontaneous. I saw that happen twice. My younger son was playing the football team in Harvard soccer, and my oldest son would be of them. And he started doing a line dance on the field, on the side of the field, and he grabbed our hands like a hora, and we joined him. There was no music, but he felt that thing. And I saw this in Brussels by the Monica Piss, that people started with music or not, and they started waltzing, and then the rest of the people in the street did that too together. And it was nice, it just in the middle of the street.
Yeah, it's I think it is intended to have us think about how we experience the world. So I guess the question I want to ask is, what does it mean when it says that the last line, if this makes them appear mad to those with less sensitive ears, should they therefore cease to dance? So what is he referring to specifically? What are these Hasidim attuned to? Like, they have a sensitivity that they can hear. What is it that they are attuned to? What are they hearing?
I think joy.
Hearing joy? Yeah, one thought. What else? What might they be hearing?
Isn't it more that they're feeling rather than hearing? They're feeling God's presence. They're feeling their soul connect to the source. Isn't that what they're dancing about? Because they're feeling from what they're saying rather than the other. That's what I would think.
Yes. Yeah. So it's a little bit can sort of throw us off with the language of less sensitive ears, because that would lead us down the path of hearing, right? Although, there is an understanding, I think it's called synesthesia. Is that when you have a mixing of your senses?
Yeah.
Where your eyes can hear and your ears can see? And that was an experience that we read about when we get the Torah at Sinai. It was the sense of all of the senses were overlapping and mishmashed. And I think you're exactly right. I think that was Carol. Was that right? If I can tell by your voice, because I can't see everybody, that they actually felt the presence of the divine. They felt the holy presence. They heard this sense of God being present in the world, and that's what they were dancing to. And so if you don't feel that, and you don't notice it, and you don't see it, or you don't hear it, then why would you be dancing in joy? I like to use the analogy of, if you can think back in the day before we had buttons that we pushed on our radios. Remember that knob that you used to have to turn to get attuned properly? And sometimes you would hear like, right, like that staticky, and you couldn't get the station. And then all of a sudden, if you like turned it and you got the sweet spot, then you could hear what was being broadcasted. And I like to use that analogy with our relationship to God, to the Holy One, to the energy that moves through the universe, whatever word, name works for God. If you can turn your knob just to the right frequency where you can feel the presence of God, then you're in a place and a space of being able to dance. But if you are not calibrated properly or correctly, you're going to hear all of the static, or you might not hear anything. And I believe this is one of the messages that the Ba'al Shem Tov is putting forth and encouraging us and asking us, like, where are you in your radio station? Are you able to turn the knob so that you can connect to something greater than yourself? Or are you stuck in this place where it's that staticky feeling? I'm not asking with any sense of judgment. It's more of just a question and a noticing that if we are able to connect to that place of, almost like the 40,000 foot view, right? The bigger picture, the larger view, a more spiritual perspective, that might be one way for us to find joy and especially calm in the midst of uncertainty and chaos. So I think that's really the overarching message, at least for me, and I think it was echoed by someone who shared that as well. I also want to mention just the idea of dancing in general, right? We had someone talk about sitting up straight, right? We added our smile push-ups. So there's this idea that dancing moves energy through your body. And you don't have to tell anybody that you're going to do this, but I'm going to give you a homework assignment, and I'm not going to grade it, and I'm not even going to know if you did it. But I want you at some point in the next few days to put yourself in a room. You can close the door so nobody can see you, put on music, and just start dancing, right? Just dance and move. Now, there's also research that talks and laugh. Yes, you can laugh as well. Thank you. I feel like I'm like on a TV show with, I'm supposed to like, audience participation, clap your hands. Oh, thank you. Shaking. So if you actually shake your body, I don't know the science behind it. I did read the article that talks about releasing energy and fear and anxiety from our bodies. So we are all in our homes, cooped up. I should have hired you, Fran. Cooped up, right? So if we can actually literally breathe, yeah, but we're going to shake, right? So, just literally shaking your body from top to bottom, shaking your legs, shaking your feet. It releases stress hormones. It releases energy. It releases anxiety. So I'm going to invite you to try that homework assignment sometime over the next few days. You can dance, you can shake, you can do both. You can dance and shake because nobody's going to see you. That's one piece. Another piece that I believe came out for me in reading this text of how we can find joy. And we're going to put the calm in parentheses because that was with the first understanding of this text, but to bring joy, there's something very joyful, I think, for many people about dancing and moving.
Rabbi?
Yes.
I wanted to share with you, and I've been very involved with this during these past few weeks. There's a whole area of study called somatic movement that addresses exactly what you're saying. It's about releasing what we hold in our physical selves through movement.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for adding that. God bless you.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Bless you. All right. We ready to move on to the next text?
Yes.
I'm noticing some nodding, so we'll keep moving. The Ba'al Shem Tov was orphaned from his father, the hidden tzaddik, the hidden righteous one, Rabbi Eliezer, at the age of 5. The last words spoken to him by his holy father before passing were, Yisrolik, fear nothing but God alone. Love every single Jew without exception, with the full depth of your heart and with the fire of your soul, no matter who he is or how she behaves. How would you feel? Can you imagine if these were the last words that you heard from your father? Would they have brought you comfort? Why or why not? Yisrolik, fear nothing but God alone. Love every single Jew without exception, with the full depth of your heart and with the fire of your soul, no matter who he is or how she behaves.
That would have been an awesome way to say goodbye, because as a child, and then your middle years and high school and young adult years, and if you were the child that, resisted against your father, but then there were the good times, it just really would have ended on a beautiful piece of note. It would have on the highest musical note you could imagine.
So that sounds like it would have been comforting. Yes. Any other thoughts?
I think just the opposite, that message very deep and difficult for a 5-year-old child to absorb, losing his father and being told that everything is fine and look at everything good, and here he's looking at his father dying. That'd be a lot for him to question and absorb at that young age.
Yep. For sure. For sure.
I think it gives him,
Not comforting. All right. Other thoughts?
I think it gives him the child a community of love by having that those glasses to look through, and gives him a better chance of succeeding. So I think the father was making a community as an umbrella over the child.
All right. Thank you. So we have another vote for yes, comforting. Anyone else?
I think that it's rather scary. I think if it was me, I'd want my father to say that he loved me without exception, with the full depth of his heart and with the love of his soul, so that I can work and love myself. Then I can first go out and love and help others.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts?
I just think it's interesting that he singles out the Jewish people. And I'm thinking that at that time with the pogroms, you needed to keep your community close, and you couldn't have any divisions. And this way, if you loved everybody without exception, you would be a united mass, maybe.
Yep, thank you. Always helpful to read our texts in a historically appropriate, contextualized way, right? So one of the challenges of reading Chassidic texts, I did a lot of sifting through my material to bring you these, but there are a lot of assumptions in the Chassidic world, right? You're going to be a man if you're studying this. You're going to believe wholeheartedly in a God who controls the universe, that we are a Jewish community. We always stick together. It's very insular. So there are a lot of sort of givens when studying Chassidic texts. I tried to pick out the gentler ones. But even with that, there's still what you noticed, right? Susan, is that right? I can't see your name.
Yep.
So this notion of love every single Jew without exception, with the full depth of your heart, with the fire of your soul, no matter who he is or how she behaves, that still is part and parcel of this time period and throughout much of Jewish history, and even continues today, right? So it's this question of insular, do we look externally? And if we go back to what I said in the beginning of the session, how are we able to hold both as true, right? How can we support the Jewish community and at the same time reach out and be connected to the world at large? And it's a dialectic, right? There's some people that say, I'm only going to give my tzedakah, my charity, to the Jewish community because people who aren't Jewish are going to give elsewhere. And then there are other people that say, no, but I'm a citizen of the world, and even though I'm Jewish, I want to help the Red Cross, or I want to help, UNICEF, whatever the global charity is.
Yeah.
And my answer would be yes. Right? Yes. It's not either or, it's yes. Both ends.
You're right.
So here again, we see from the historical context, the message from his dad is the Jewish community really needs to stick together. So one of the ways that I believe this has been helpful for us, for many of us, is just by virtue of the fact that we're on this class together through Temple Bethel, right? So our Jewish community is really looking out for all of its members.
Yeah.
Many of the other synagogues that I also am affiliated with, and friends that are colleagues in other places, are really focusing on how can we show up and support our members in this time of great need and unprecedented pandemic, right? So it is this notion of love every single Jew without exception, with the full depth of your heart, the fire of your soul, no matter who he is or how she behaves. And how do we send that out globally, right? Because we remember it's not an either or. So there's the first part, nobody really spoke about. Fear nothing but God alone. And so I don't want to get into a class of theology. We can schedule that for another time if there is an interest. And I don't want to make the assumption that everybody here has a belief in God, knows what their relationship is to God in a static way. And I do want to point out that one of the ways that might be helpful to find joy and calm in the midst of uncertainty and chaos is through one's relationship to the divine. So if you are a person who has a deep faith, who has a belief that there is a God who may or may not be in control of the world, who may or may not be able to change the course of history, whatever your understanding of God is, if you are able to connect to that deep, eternal place and space in our universe, that is a way for many people to find joy and calm, because there's a greater understanding that somebody else is calling the shots, right? There's, as one of my friends says, there's someone upstairs directing traffic. If that feels comfortable for you, that might be a way, a path, an invitation to explore how your anxiety, stress, depression, whatever you're feeling, can be mitigated, can be shifted, can evolve, can dissipate with an understanding that there is nothing to fear but God alone. So I mention that. I'm not professing that you must believe. I'm not suggesting that this is the way to go. I'm merely sharing from this teaching of the Ba'al Shem Tov, there was a presumption that there's nothing to fear but God alone. Even in the midst of pogroms, even in the midst of famine, even in the midst of starvation, even in the midst of living in shtetls and ghettos, whatever happens, there is a bigger picture. So I just offer that. If you'd like to continue the conversation, I'm happy to do so offline. You can find me in the Beth L clergy section, and feel free to email me, and I'd be happy to speak more with you about that. I wanted to get to our last text for today. Is there anybody that would like to volunteer to read that? Is the font big enough that you can see it?
I will.
Thank you.
There are angels that wait to sing their song only once in 7 years. Others sing only once in 50 years, or even once in 1,000 years. Whatever they say is brief and to the point. Some say holy, others say blessed. Some say a single verse. It is said about certain angels that each one says one verse from the chapter of Psalms that begins, "Give thanks to God, for he is good." Yet we Jews are permitted to say praises at any time or season, and to draw out the praises, songs, and raptures as much as we wish. The best way to understand this is with a parable, the story of a king to whom all his servants and officers come and recite hymns of praise. Each one has an appointment for a limited amount of time to speak his praise, each according to his position and importance. Yet this is only when the king is in a favorable mood. When the king is upset and angered, then all are afraid to provide him any praise whatsoever, as it is written. Why are you praising the king at the time of fury? That is why, due to the concern that the king may, heaven forbid, not be in the best of moods, or that he may be angered due to something or other, they are accustomed to be as brief as possible at all times and make a hasty exit. Yet when the king's dear and precious child enters, he has no such concerns. For even if the king is in a state of anger, the very sight of his precious child brings him joy and delight. The anger dissipates of its own and obviously never returns. All the time his son stands before him, as in human nature. The child, therefore, has no worries and enters at any time he so wishes and exudes praise without end. For he knows that this brings the king, his father, joy and delight. Why is it this way? Why do anger and fury disappear when joy and love enter? Where do they go? Yes, this is human nature, but nevertheless, we must try to understand how and why. But this is the power of love and joy. When they prevail, they cause anger and fury to ascend upward toward their root. This is a part of the secret knowledge, that these forces of anger and strict judgment are mollified when they reach their origin, since as its origin, all is pure goodness. It comes out that anger and fury are healed and mollified through love and joy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How might this lesson apply to our lives today?
I think we need to search out joy, to find things that make us happy. But when things aren't good, I call my children and talk to my grandchildren and look at them on the screen.
So you do exactly what this parable says. That's amazing. Thank you. I didn't even plant you there. Thank you for that. Right. So when we have a sense of anger and fury, how do we shift them, right? We sort of want to banish them. We want to move from that space, and we can do that through love and joy. So for those who mentioned that they are not in the greatest place, or they're lonely, or they're sad, or it's been really hard. And again, I want to acknowledge where you are. I don't want this to be something called spiritual bypassing, whereby you don't acknowledge how you're feeling and you just go to the spiritual world and say, it's all good, it's all going to be fine, it's, I'm just going to move into gratitude. That's not what I suggest. Feel your feelings, acknowledge where you are, and then after you've given yourself space to feel it, shift it, right? Because staying in those yucky feelings for extended periods of time, we know is not healthy and will not send us to greener pastures, so to speak, right? So feel your feelings and then do something that brings you joy. If you have grandkids and that brings you joy, get in touch with your grandkids. If they answer you on their texts, right? Take out family albums, watch old movies, put on a comedy, paint, draw, sketch, bake, dance, listen to music, go outside in nature, watch the animals, the birds flying right by your window if it's too hot to go outside, get in the swimming pool, move your body, right? So there's lots of ways to move ourselves from this sense of anger and fury or gloom and doom to a place of love and joy. So
I want to share something.
Yes.
It just reminds me of the Chinese philosophy of yin and yang, to apply balance to my life. And if I can build awareness about that, I can kind of build it in to my day. Just like, I find I have to put a routine in these days. And so I build work time, play time, stuff like that. And I think that's important.
Yes.
To include it, especially if you're more serious or you get into a funk, and then just work your way out.
Yes, thank you. Balance is definitely important. So in the last remaining minutes, I'm going to give you each about, 30 seconds of think time. I want to hear from each one of you. One word or teaching that you learned this morning from the Ba'al Shem Tov about how to shift. How do we move from this sense of anger, fury, calamity, uncertainty, anxiety, to calm and joy, right? We're in a moment that's uncertain and chaotic in many ways. How do we move ourselves? So I'm going to just very briefly give you some key words about the text that we did, because if you're anything like me, you're still remembering the last text. So I want to do a quick review. Study with energy and great joy, because that will reduce your disturbing thoughts. The second story, the teaching was the Chassidim who were dancing, and the deaf man walks by and sees everybody dancing, and he thinks that they're crazy and doesn't understand what's going on, but it's really the Chassidim that are attuned to the presence of God. The next teaching was the words that the Beth's father shared with him when he died. Yisroeluk, fear nothing but God alone, love every single Jew without exception, blah, blah, blah. And then the last teaching was on how joy sweetens anger and fury, love and joy. So I'm gonna ask you to take 30 seconds or so, and if you're willing, share one teaching, one idea that you believe can help you find joy and calm in the midst of uncertainty and chaos. Sheila?
Well, I think look at the joy rather than oi of life, and smile and keep moving.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Anybody else want to share their Hank?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Carol, where are you? Through this coronavirus and being caught in the house, I've been going to a lot of classes on the Zoom, both here and IJKL, and I think what I'd like to do is start my day with a day of prayer and start a prayer ritual for myself. I think that would start with a positive note for me.
Beautiful. Great.
So I'm going to pursue that.
Okay. All right. Hope if I see you again, report back and let me know how it's going. Or if you're here next week for class, you can do a check-in.
Okay.
All right.
I also, could you hear me? No,
Yes.
she can't hear. Yes. I also find that when I start my day with my walk and I use earphones and walk to music, which is something what you were talking about, I feel much better when I come back. I can walk longer and my whole body is in motion. Thank you for this.
Great. Yes. So movement definitely helps. Thank you. Yes.
I think it's very important to have balance. I also start with a walk, but I also have this compulsion to know what's going on in the world. What we've both been trying to do, and I especially, is balancing getting the news, which puts you in a state of anxiety and feeling like it's the end of the world, with dancing or doing aerobics in my bathroom, to walking, and we cook, and all these things you mentioned. I think it's really important to balance your day, because if you spend the whole day watching news, you may as well jump out the window. That's how it feels to me.
Yes. Thank you, Carol. Yep. Alan?
I think that this is where psychology and physiology match with emotions. You cannot do two things at once. It's been proven. Your brain will not let you do that. So you need to exclude the bad stuff. I don't believe in the balance concept. We don't even turn on the TV news at all until 10 o'clock. All they do is talk about local robberies. It isn't worth it. We're going to find out anything good. So occupy your mind somehow with anything else, whether it's exercise, reading a good book, listening to music, walking while you're doing. You're walking while you're thinking. It's not good. So that's my suggestion, and that's what we do.
All right. Yes. Thank you. Everyone has to find their own path, but there are many people I know who don't watch the news. You know, I am I have a joke with my husband that I'm on a need to know basis. So he will actually say to me, you know, Amy, there's a hurricane coming. We need supplies. Like if I watch that, it just gives me too much agita. But for some people, and there are many people that I know, that they want to know what's going on, right? So you have to figure out for yourself what works. Any other thoughts? Any other?
Janice? Yeah.
leaning?
What I do, I wanted to give a tip for the person who speaks to the grandchildren. What I do is I tape with my little telephone something that is joyful from my grandchild in Europe, and that's funny or lovely. And I watch that before I go to sleep, and it's very short, but it gives me a good feeling. And I've read that a lot of people do that with any babies on internet. They look at those things because there's something about new life that's joyful. So you could do that from any babies and download that or but if she can't get the grandchildren on the phone, then if you tape something, you could repeat it that for yourself. It's another focus. That does help. And the other thing that helps me is to realize what I don't know, I don't know. What I don't know that I don't know. And I think that I don't know the solution and when this is going to be better. And a comforting thought for me is that God knows. So I'm making a simus often of nothing. And just to remember he knows. So maybe I'm spending a lot of time on spoiled energy, and that kind of switches me back.
All right. Thank you. Any other gleanings or learnings from the Ba'al Shem Tov this morning?
Yes, I was very impressed by his ability to time travel. I think I'm going to practice that.
I know.
I'm out of here.
Yes, if it was that easy, right? Halavai, that we could just, you know, like Dorothy, right? Like clap our slippers together.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Sorry.
I believe it is good to end on laughter, and I'll sing us out. Ivdu et Hashem besimcha, Ivdu et Hashem besimcha, bo lefanav birnana, lefanav birnana. Ivdu et Hashem besimcha, Ivdu et Hashem besimcha, bo lefanav birnana, lefanav birnana. May our day unfold in joy and in calm, even in the midst of the uncertainty and the chaos. And I will look forward to seeing you all next week, same time, same station. And we will be looking at the teachings of the great-grandson of the Ba'al Shem Tov, whose name is Rebbe Nachman of Breslov. Have a great rest of your day, and I will look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks for joining Temple Bethel this morning. Bye-bye.